How's it going, YouTube? Coming in today with another video, and today, guys, what's bringing you is going to be the updated guide to Cyac format. There's no ban list yet, so Cashier is still very real and a deck that we have to worry about. So I want to keep you up to date with all the new trends, optimal hand trap lineups, and everything that you need to know to be successful this format. Thank you all so very much for 17,000 subscribers. I'm so excited to be here, hitting 20,000 soon. We're on the way. The giveaway is already in motion, so I do hope that you're ready for that because that giveaway is going to be massive at 20K. So if you haven't already subscribed, definitely subscribe to the channel so we can get there as soon as possible. Today we're going to be talking about a lot of new information, so definitely excited to do so. Also, hitting a new goal on the channel means that we also have a new sponsor in the channel. So thank you so much, Sleep Chief, for joining us on the team. We have Gem, Sleep Chief, Dragon Shield, and Imperial Duelist. Sleep Chief just dropped the new border sleeves for Kaido versus Shenlong. Definitely go ahead and check those out on the website. You can use my link down in the description below to go ahead and get 5% off on these as well. Also, my new playmat drops this Friday the 12th, so definitely go ahead, check this out. It's the new Visas playmat. I'm very excited because it shows off all the different personalities of Visas. So you have the Rhino Heart, you have Riem Heart, you have the Rise Heart, and you have the Reich Heart. This is really cool because you have Rhino, which shows sorrow, you have Reich Heart, which shows fear, Riem, which is like a lot more solemn, and then you have anger and Rise Heart. So it's just another part to really show off the lore. You can also see in the shards the planet that they come from. So definitely a really amazing playmat. Huge shout outs to Midnight Dreams for making this. And then this will be released over on Imperial Duelist on Friday, I believe around 6 p.m. PST, so about 9 p.m. EST. Definitely make sure that you go ahead and get your own. This will directly support the channel as well. So this is something where if you do want to get a playmat, just know that everything that on this channel does go back into the channel. And I really do appreciate everyone for being here. Thank you all again for 17,000 subscribers. I wouldn't be here without you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And without further ado, let's hop running into our first topic. So the first thing I want to talk about is going to be using effects in the draw phase to ignore droll. This is really important because if you forget and go main phase and start activating effects, then your opponent can just drop droll immediately. So if you're playing like Pearly and you can activate anything in the draw phase, go ahead and do so at least you get to play around droll for a little longer. This is why I still really enjoy the Salvation package, because you can at least pitch it out of your hand then use it in draw phase, so you get even more advantage. The other thing that's really cool too is if you're playing like Branded, you can Branded opening in the draw phase. So you just want to make sure that you're playing around droll as much as possible. Usually if you're playing like super heavy, you want to drop Bike first and then use Prodigy before you summon out the Piercer, because at that point your opponent might not want to play into the Gamma, which is going to be the next big topic here, is stop playing into Gamma. I see this happen way too much now, and I watch a lot of DB. This happens a ton. If your opponent uses Prodigy effect and then you drop Ogre, just know that your opponent can immediately go into Baron, because all they have to do is go Accel off the Gamma driver, bring back Gamma, go right into Baron. So they just have a lot of opportunity to be able to just go really plus, right? And it's one of those things where if it's your opponent's only card, or they only have one card in hand, you probably could risk it if they only have one in hand. Obviously, if they have nothing, then you can go ahead and just Ogre Prodigy, that's fine. But you don't really want to risk running into a Gamma just because there's no reason to, right? I still think that it's really optimal to go ahead and drop Ogre on the Monk Warrior, but we'll talk about that a little later. So Baron, definitely a very strong card. Stop playing into Gamma. Just make sure that there's a monster on board before you drop a hand trap. Sometimes you can get rewarded, but at the same time, the amount of punish that can happen with Gamma is just way too big. So talking about where to Ogre though, a lot of people say, well, you should just Ogre and Prodigy, but I think that it's even more correct to just Ogre on Monk, because every list only plays 2 Monk, right? So if your opponent goes activate Monk and you Ogre, not only are you cutting off a search, but the Monk does go back to the extra deck, and they can't bring it back either because it's an 8, and there's no scale that allows them to Pendulum Summon an 8. So then your opponent has to search out the other Monk Warrior if they want to Pendulum Summon, right? So now they have no Monk Warrior in deck, and then if you clear their scales, there's literally no way for them to set up their scales again. So that's another way that you cut them off their grind game. The other way people are talking about if you want to hit the Super Heavy Samurai deck with Ogre is just wait for Scarecrow, because at that point they can't like Peacemaker target Scarecrow, and they can't use the Scarecrow effect to Reborn, because the second they discard, it has to summon to an arrow it points to. So if you Ogre the Scarecrow, the monster just won't summon, which is also very optimal, and you can kind of decide which one's better for you, hitting the Monk or the Scarecrow. I personally value making my opponent lose their grind game by having no scales later on, so I definitely always just hit the Monk. but you can hit Scarecrow. I don't think that it's bad. It's just if your opponent has the extender, right, which this deck is built for them, it can be a little dicey trying to play the rest of the turn out. But that's really up to you on what cards you want your opponent to be able to get to, because especially if you let this go through, they can get to Soul Gaia, which allows them to go even further before they even need to use the Peacemaker, because by then they're probably already making a Baron, which makes this even less optimal. So I would say always just hit the Monk, because this is just better. But moving past this though, versus Super Heavy Samurai, if you have Improm set, always set it in the Pendulum Scales. If you're playing against the deck, set this card in the Scales. And this is really important too, because if your opponent has a monster on board and they go to Active Prodigy, of course they're going to get shut off of that. If your opponent has to summon out a Piercer to be able to get to their Prodigy anyways, when they go Scarecrow, at least you'll have a monster on board that you can negate with the Improm, which is really good too. This is also really cool because the second that the Improm leaves the board, of course, it's still going to be affecting the columns. So if you even had this set in the opposite column that they activate Prodigy, then it shuts off Monk. So that's another thing too, where you're always going to get some kind of value offsetting an Improm into the Pendulum Scales. And this is just like a technical play thing, but just make sure that if you do have this card, you're always setting it in the Scales. But the next thing here is that a lot of people are cutting Stardust in favor of things like Boral Savage, and we'll talk about why that is here in a little bit. But I do think that this is kind of iffy, and if you actually want to do so, because the Stardust is pretty nice in a lot of awkward situations, and if people are actually going to be on Nibiru, because Kashtira is still around. So it definitely is a little bit awkward to cut this. You don't really need it, but I do recommend playing it. I still like it a lot myself. And if a lot of people are expecting that people are cutting it, it's kind of the same logic as like Nibiru. Then it gets even better if everyone's like, oh, no one's playing that card, and then they just drop Nibiru or something, then you go, oh yeah, a Cell Effect, summon this, go into Baron. So definitely really cool and something to think about, but I do think that if a lot of people are off this, maybe it's time to play it. The next thing though is talk about optimal hand traps. So we don't have a ban list yet. So right now it's optimal to play Nibiru, I believe, in the main deck, because you really want to be able to shut down the Kashtira deck. Although you have a lot of other hand traps that really do shut down Kashtira, Nibiru is definitely still the best. So this is something to really think about. But as of right now, I would still consider this very optimal. Talking about the most optimal hand traps, most of these are 3-ofs. Usually you're just going to go ahead and play 12 hand traps at least, and being these cards. You'll probably end up playing more, but these cards are definitely going to be the ones that you want to play. Droll is really solid, of course, against most every deck. There's almost never a situation where Droll's is dead. Gamma, a lot of people are disrespecting Gamma, even though it's everywhere, which is kind of crazy, because if you're going to play into Gamma, then you're probably losing that game anyway. So don't play into Gamma. I'm just going to stress that again. But Gamma is definitely going to be really crazy. Some people are testing out playing Lambda, which I don't hate either. I think Lambda is very good. It's another card where if you're able to resolve a game on your turn, and then you have the driver again. So you could even search like a Delta and Super Heavy, so at least you have a spell negate. So there's a couple different ways you can look at it, but I do think that Gamma in general is very, very cool. This format's very good. Ghost Ogre, of course, going to be probably one of the hand traps of the format, versus like Droll or Gamma. I don't really know which one's like going to be the number one, right? But Ogre, this format is definitely really good. And then Ashe, it's not like fantastic, but they're still branded around, and there's other rogue decks and whatnot where Ashe just shines against. So definitely still gotta run it, I believe. It's very rare when we see a format where Ashe is just not that relevant, because it's still very generically good. So you probably still want to run this. Talking about less optimal hand traps, I think that if you don't play against exactly Kashtira, Nibiru is pretty mid. Veiler is pretty good this format, but there's a lot of situations where, again, if you're playing against like Kashtira, or if your opponent has D-Shifter, I'm really not trying to play so many hand traps that cannot be activated under D-Shifter. Like, we're already playing Droll and Ogre, but playing more seems even worse. And then a lot of people too are activating cards in draw phase to summon out like Lily or Aluber. So this is where Moonlit is a bit better than Veiler. And then Mortar is a card that you can still activate under D-Shifter too. So it's a little bit better than Veiler right now. So definitely take your pick if you want to run like extra hand traps. But I think that probably out of the 3, Nibiru is still the better option at the moment, just because people are really disrespecting Nibiru and they don't really care if it's in the format or not, and you see a lot of people playing into it pretty hard, especially if you play against like Sprite or if you play against like Kashtira. Usually you can get some free wins with it. But Mortar is definitely going to see a lot of play right now. It's at least a 2-of, I would believe, with any of these would just be a 2-of, because you're already playing so many other hand traps. But Mourner isn't like super bad, but it's not super optimal. Remember that this card has to happen on your own turn as Chainlink 1. It's only good on your opponent's turn. It only works as Chainlink 2 on very specific situations like Artifact Scythe and Token Collector because those are mandatory. But other than that, this is a card that isn't going to be the best, but if you want to run extra hand traps, this is probably where I would go with it. I don't really have a like lesser optimal board breaker slide here just because these are the ones that you should be playing. I don't really feel like any of the other ones are like that great at the moment to even mention. Dark Ruler and sideboard, definitely going to be fantastic, a card that you really want to run, especially against Super Heavy Samurai. Of course, you can always run in a situation where your opponent has like a spell canceller, so you also have to keep that in mind. But Kurakara, definitely the craziest card here. Main deck 3 of, side deck 3 of, main deck 2, side 1. Do what you gotta do, but you gotta have a place out of this card this format. It's so good. Your opponent goes draw with Plump, draw with Nor after the trap is used, and then you just drop Kurakara and you win the game. There's so many situations where even in this format you can drop Kurakara. If you don't kill End Phase Reborn, they're Ghost Ogre at the very least. So definitely a very, very crazy card. You definitely want a play set of it. Santa Claus is really good too alongside Kaijus. Santa Claus has to be someone in defense. So this is something that's really optimal in Purely. And that's why you see a lot of the times in Purely, they're going to main deck 3 Santa Claus and then 3 Kurakara as well. This also plays less into talents too, which is really nice. And then in the Purely deck, you can just go into a really easy Exceed, slap into the Santa Claus, and then make a huge Zeus. You also contribute someone a Santa Claus over like an Ibli, so that's another really optimal usage of Santa Claus. But just kind of going back for a second too, Purely does main deck 3 of each of these typically. The Purely list that just got first place in Des Moines was maining both of these at 3. And in the OCG, we were seeing a lot of lists main decking 3 Santa Claus, and Kurakara was definitely in those lists as well. But this is a card that I know it's a bit expensive right now, but if you can get those, I definitely recommend to pick those up. Talking more so about outing 5 Rainbow Magician. Now, this is really awkward, and a lot of people are trying to find different ways that they can go about just dealing with this card. Baron, Oppo, Regulus is typically the end board that you end with. But the problem with this is the only card that actually outs your opponent going activate 5 Rainbow is Baron. Because Regulus just negates effects, so that doesn't even deal with the 5 Rainbow. They go activate 5 Rainbow, you go chain Regulus, and then literally nothing happens. It's like activating Regulus against Mystic Mind, right? So the only card that actually deals with 5 Rainbow on this board is Baron de Fleur. But a lot of people are adding Savage to the board instead, so at that point you have 2 cards that can like negate an activation, so you don't have to worry about 5 Rainbow as much, which is definitely a lot more optimal. I see that's why people are cutting Stardust, just so you can play Savage and not have to worry about this as much. But there are a couple cards that you can use to out 5 Rainbow. You can play Dagda in combo and set Lancia from deck, which is really cool, because Lancia is generically very good against a lot of different decks out there. Again, it's not going to be the craziest, but it's not bad either. Then you also run into a lot of situations too where you can just go ahead and set this from your hand, and again, Dagda sets it from deck, so you don't have to worry about not having something set, and it's very easily obtainable in your combo, right? This is also really cool because it's just 2 monsters with different names, so it's another way that you can go ahead and out the Nibiru token on your board if you don't have anything else that you can do with it. Also, Clockwork Knight, this card got bought out to $9. It's a very good card. It not only gives you a stat buff, but you also were able to go ahead and banish this from your grave, discard a card, and search for an Earth Machine. So while you're worried about a card like 5 Rainbow being on the board, you can go ahead and set Clockwork and then combo off, deal with the 5 Rainbow, and then you can go ahead and pop this with like a Baron and then go about your day. So I think that's really good too. Clockwork Knight is definitely a phenomenal card in the Super Heavy Samurai deck. You also have a few different options as well. You can make the Golden Cloud Beast in combo to go ahead and return the 5 Rainbow. You can search Magical Hound off Gearbox, which is another card that can go ahead and just bounce 5 Rainbow. You have the Eccentric, which is also really nice here. Just another card that allows you to go ahead and clear it immediately. And the last one here is going to be Breakthrough Skill. This is a really interesting choice. You can go ahead and set it. It's an Improm, and then during your turn on the follow-up, you can go ahead and banish this from your graveyard and negate a monster that your opponent controls. I do hope that you enjoyed today's video. Definitely not like the usual videos, but we're just going over a lot of very general information that you definitely have to know moving forward into the format. If you haven't already checked out my Discord, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, definitely go ahead and do so. And if you want a coaching session over at Metafy, definitely PM me on Discord if you have any questions. I hope that everyone has a wonderful night. I'll catch you all in the next video. Thank you.